Well, welcome back to another episode of We Don't Color on the Dog. We've got with us State Representative Alex Andrade. Good morning, Alex.
Hey, good morning.
This has been a regular feature, and every time we do it, the viewership people enjoy the conversation. We've got a session. The session's ended. Of course, you'll have a special session coming back to finalize the budget. But let's talk about the bills that you presented. You had 10 you presented, 10 were indefinitely postponed. I mean, five were indefinitely postponed, five were laid on the table. For our listeners, what does laid on the table mean?
Laid on the table generally means that you are giving up your bill number essentially, and you are going to take the Senate's bill. So you have to file similar bills on both sides, and then one bill is the one that ultimately passes, just so that we all pass the same language in both chambers. So generally, when you see laid on the table, that means it was laid down so that the Senate version could be taken up. I had one of the bills that was indefinitely postponed is this education bill related to charter schools and conversion charter schools that Senator Gates and I worked on. And it did actually pass. It just passed by getting it amended into a much larger education package at the very last minute. So, Rick, this was something that you and I came up with. This was an idea that you floated to me last year. You know, the concept of allowing parents to vote to convert a public school to a charter if parents in that school thought it would be a good idea. The concept of allowing municipalities to play a larger role in that will, assuming Governor DeSantis signs it into law, will become part of Florida statute. You know, and it only took 2 sessions to get it done.
Well, and the point that I was making, and we talked about it. I talked to DC Reeves about it too, the mayor, because I just felt I'm a big proponent of public education. My daughter's a teacher, but I was seeing that in some of these larger counties where there's a huge voting block on the school board outside of the municipality, that the city schools may not always be getting a fair shake. And I felt like this could be at least something in the hand, give the parents and the cities a little bit more control if they wanted to take on a challenge of their school system. I think Gulf Breeze may be a perfect example of a small town that where the schools are so integral to it. That if things got out of hand in the north end, which they tend to in Santa Rosa, that the city would have something that they could use to at least make the school board treat the city schools fairly. So for me, that has been the deal. I think that you've got to understand the landscape, and charter schools are definitely part of the landscape. So it's good to see it. Don also picked up the same bill. So, I think we don't know what'll survive veto, but I think where we are is just really talking about those bills. And I think that the of all the bills that you had that didn't look like they were going anywhere, what's the one that's most disappointing to you?
You don't get married to your bills. I'm not disappointed that any didn't pass or pass. You know, like I did pass the medical marijuana bill off the House floor. That started out as a big kind of just like common sense bill to fix our medical marijuana program in Florida. Like it allowed for a home grow with two plants if you already had your medical marijuana card. Ultimately, the language that passed off the House floor was related to allowing veterans to get their medical marijuana cards for free and saying you only had to re-up your medical marijuana license every 2 years instead of every year. There was other language I would have loved to keep in there, like you can qualify for medical marijuana if your alternative is you've already been prescribed an opioid. I thought that made sense. I thought the telehealth components made sense too. I don't know why you have to have an in-person visit to a physician to get your medical marijuana card approved. But medical marijuana is a big topic. This was just my attempt to try and inject some sanity into the program. Um, I have one that I've worked on for several years related to cash bonds
Yeah,
and
that
what
was the one that,
happens.
yeah, that's the one that jumped out to me because you and I have talked about it a while because it is to me it appears to be an unfair system right now.
Well, yeah, if your friend bails you out of jail and your friend makes sure you show up to court for every court date and until the conclusion of your criminal case, your friend should get their money back because they upheld their end of the bargain. Right now, our clerks of court can take that money to pay the debts of the criminal defendant, regardless of if those debts were incurred for that case or any prior case. I don't think that's right. I think the only person that should be paying those debts is the person that incurred those debts, not anybody else. who might just be doing a favor for that person. There's a program here related to the Bail Project. The Bail Project, um, they don't bail people out of jail to allow them to go commit crimes or go back to a riot or anything like that. They provide services to people here in town who are here, who are arrested, put in jail, and they can't afford a $300, $500 bond. The bail project will go post that bond for them, provide them services, help them keep their job, stay in their apartment, keep their kids. But they also make sure they show back up to court. Once that court case is over, I think the bail project should get their money back. They're a charity here in town that's doing good work, helping people again keep their lives together during the pendency of their criminal case. I think that's a good service. And I don't think that they should also have to pay the debts of the person they're helping keep their job, stay in their apartment, or keep their kids. So yeah, I mean, I got one more session in me. It'll be a full court press next year. Hopefully, I can get that one across the finish line next year.
Well, and those that watch the legislature like I have over the years, sometimes it takes a while for an idea or a concept to take root. It just does. It happens a lot of times. Where did the opposition come from on this bill?
Well, the folks that have busted the jail doors wide open and posted bond for folks to go back to riot, they didn't do me any favors on this one. There's a huge concern of like a BLM type situation where like in what was it like Minneapolis or something where even Kamala Harris was posting bonds for people who were participating in riots and then they went back and continued to commit crime. That's not the operation that's happening. That's not even the circumstances contemplated by the bill, but it's very easy for the bail bonds lobby to conflate the two issues and say, if you allow people to get their money back at the end of a case, you're allowing these people to make sure people commit crimes. Like it's a logical fallacy, right? Like we're only talking about situations where someone has shown up to court for every single court hearing and who has been adjudicated either innocent or guilty, right? But unfortunately, because of those circumstances a few years back, it's been tougher than it should have been to get this bill across the finish line.
Yeah, and you look at the bills that were laid on the table that did get added to committee bills or the Senate version of the bill, and we talked about the charter school. Is there another bill, even though you're not married to them, is there another bill that you were pleased to see progress through the House?
Well, you see a lot laid on the table because as we progress through session, I realized anything with my name on it would probably be getting killed by the governor. So I took as many Senate bills as I possibly could to avoid that circumstance.
Right, right.
So my bill, kind of clearing the way for President Trump to put his presidential library here in Florida. I was happy to see pass. I was excited to be able to help IHMC. Senator Gates and I both worked on a bill to allow IHMC to operate more effectively. I was excited to see that bill pass. I still have one bill that's left. It's my conforming bill for the healthcare budget. And that's going to be loaded up with policies. It's going to look very different than it does right now. But yeah, going back to, so we're not having a special session. We extended out our session till June 6th. Um, One of the key components to that is if we pass a budget and send it to the governor during session, he's on a shorter time frame to approve it. Um, I think what may occur is that we will pass this budget next week, Friday, or next weekend, Saturday or Sunday, even. Send it to the governor, and I believe in that circumstance he has 14 days to sign it. So it's possible that's what we end up doing to try and head off some type of fight over vetoes and veto overrides. I'm not 100% sure of the play. I'm not sure if it'll all work out, but that's one scenario that I think made sense for why we extended our session to June 6th instead of, gaveling out completely and then coming back for a special. If we gavelled out completely, Governor DeSantis could have tried to like grandstand and force us to come back to pass a budget by demanding we have a special session. In this circumstance, we just extended our session out because we couldn't agree on how much we wanted to cut in taxes in our budget.
Well, and you've got two different plans, the Senate's plan and the House plan on how to do that. Talking about your budget and healthcare, Medicare, you found a huge gap out there, about $160 million. We talked about it early, then it kind of got lost in the discussion over Hope, Florida. But how has that settled out, Alex?
Well, at this point, I don't see the reason why we should pay for Aka's mistake. I think Aka needs to make ends meet. They lost, misplaced $160 million that we gave them to pay a Medicaid fine back to the federal government. I think we'll end up giving them a portion of that to help them, but I do think it's incumbent upon them now at this point to figure out how to make ends meet. Right now in the Senate proposed budget, they have $183 million set aside to help ACA pay federal fines. That's general revenue from Florida taxpayers. I don't know the precise amount we'll end up agreeing on, but right now, as far as our negotiating posture, I don't feel overly compelled to help ACA fix this mistake without ACA figuring its own books out.
Now, where did the money go if it didn't go to pay?
They used it for cash flow. They used it for cash flow to make up funding shortfalls elsewhere that they just hadn't fully budgeted for. That's a result of the fact that Ockett didn't reconcile their books, their bank account, the largest bank account in the state, mind you. This is our Medicaid bank account moves billions of dollars every year, hundreds of millions of dollars every week. They didn't reconcile it more than once a year. So since that's been caught and we highlighted it, they've now started reconciling their books every month. We'll have a lot of more reporting requirements from the state agencies to provide reporting to the legislature so we can help them with their oversight. Um, but yeah, I mean, I could not imagine a business running where they didn't reconcile their books more than once a year, especially at the size and scope that ACA has.
Alex, I know you pursued wanting to be the chairman of your committee. It's turned out, and you've teased me about it because I kept thinking you were on a dead end committee, but in no way has it been that. And of course, the money is huge that passes through Medicaid and in ACA. Have you been surprised at what you found?
Yeah, I mean, you don't expect as much incompetence as we found this year. But no, I mean, it's the biggest spend we have in Florida. It's our biggest budget silo. I wanted to stay in the budget. I knew that with losing Senator Broxton, somebody needed to stay in the budget, stay involved in the budget. I was excited I advocated for Judge Maney to get that position on judiciary probes that he got. I'm really proud of the work he's been doing. He's been doing incredible work in that silo. But I wanted to stay in the budget, and I knew I wasn't going to be the appropriations chair, so I figured why not ask for the biggest budget silo? And it's been a lot of fun. I mean, we have to get a grasp on Medicaid managed care. I don't think we've done a good job here in Florida of focusing Medicaid managed care on health outcomes. And I think that because we're focused in so many different directions on, overseeing spending, which we do a poor job of anyway, we've lost sight of health outcomes. When we're entrusting this massive swath of a government function, administering Medicaid to these private for profit companies, I think that that's a good idea, but that's only a good idea if we as the government, if we as the legislature and the executive have the proper oversight in place to make sure that we're incentivizing these for profit companies to focus on health outcomes and providing these services to our constituents and not just on maximizing their profit. They should have a profit. They should be able to run this better than government. I think they have the resources, the know how, the intellectual ability to do a better job than government officials could in administering this massive program. But if we don't have the proper oversight, we're doing a disservice and we're actually getting a worse product. So I've dove deep on that this year, and I'll continue doing that until I'm done in office.
Well, I think with under House Speaker Danny Perez, the House has been more aggressive in trying to play that oversight role of the agencies. Based on what I've seen, you didn't really get a whole lot of cooperation, and not just your committee, but other committees too in the House.
Yeah, state agencies, there's definitely a dynamic, and this dynamic has been highlighted this year where the executive office, starting from the top, from Governor DeSantis' office on down, they treat legislators like part-time hobbyists. They're not treating them like partners in public service or a co-equal branch of government. And so there had to be this reset, and you're seeing that reset now. Yeah, I do have a day job. I'm supposed to be back in my community. I think that makes me a better representative. But when I'm over in Tallahassee, my role as a legislator is on equal or greater footing than the executives that are doing this full time. And it should be. And so reasserting that has been a big deal. But yeah, these government agencies, There's one story, our chair for government operations appropriations, Vicky Lopez, she couldn't get an answer on how many vehicles the state had or where they were located. Department of Management Services had essentially misplaced thousands of state vehicles, couldn't tell us if they were stolen, taken home, or what had happened to them. And they were refusing to provide this information to her. And when she said, I'm going to withhold your salary until you give me this information, he just said, I'll just wait you out and I'll get back pay. It's those types of circumstances where if the executive's not being transparent, even with the legislature, how can we expect them to be transparent with everyday Floridians? They're not. I mean, it's become a common occurrence, the complaints about public records requests being sat on by the governor's office. Shoot, I'm experiencing that now. I asked for some simple documents related to this Hope Florida negotiation with Centene and ACA and the executive office. I know they've compiled and reviewed their documents, and now they're just sitting on them. They refuse to turn them over to us.
I've got a request in the governor that I put in back in January just for the applications of all the trustees that had been appointed. I got it through Don Gates because eventually they had to turn it over to the Senate committee. But that was, I'm still waiting on that one. Is public, the sunshine laws don't seem to mean the same for the administration. And that's disappointing. And when we look at the Hope Florida, you and I've had great conversations about it, and all of that has been recorded and shared with our viewers and readers. But the thing that I've enjoyed, and I think it's what's been really needed, is for the House to really, and the Senate, to really take not an adversarial role, but an equal role. Just like you said, your role as a chairman of the committee that you're the chair of, that is equal to, or if not more important than an agency head. And that it's really been this shift in leadership. We've had great leaders in the House and the Senate, but Albritton and Perez I think, have been really skillful in how they've done this. What are your thoughts?
Well, anybody that's griping about the effectiveness of this legislature is missing the point that when we're done with our budget, we will pass, for the first time in the nation, a permanent cut to a sales tax. We will be the first state in the union to permanently reduce our sales tax revenue. We'll be cutting those taxes. From my understanding, we'll be permanently eliminating our business rent tax. We'll be cutting our budget. We'll be reducing our budget and living even further within our means. We'll kind of stop this reckless spending that we've seen over the past few years. And that's all due to the leadership of Danny Perez and thankfully the agreement of Ben Albritton in the Senate. A big reason why our budget took so long was there were disagreements about how much we needed to cut our budget and how much we needed to cut our taxes. But those will be real savings to everyday Floridians in perpetuity. Those are big generational things that we're doing right now and achieving right now that I'm extremely proud of. And I think Danny Perez is the perfect person to do it. I've had conversations with him and with others in leadership right now about the fact that if all we do is what we're doing for the next 2 years in the legislature before we term out, and we never do anything else in politics, will we be satisfied? Will we be proud of what we were able to achieve? And it's been universal that we will be. It's that type of perspective and that approach that I think will, make real everyday lasting impacts for Floridians. Now, folks might not notice it, right? If you save 0.5% in your taxes, in your sales tax at every time you make a purchase, you might not notice it every single purchase, but at the end of the year, you will have saved and your family will have saved, hundreds of dollars every year because we are living more and more within our means. When you buy a vehicle, you might not notice it, but you'll save hundreds of dollars on that purchase of a vehicle. Same with appliances and everything down the line. So those are things that I'm proud of that might go unnoticed. They might not make headlines, but they're big generational deals that we're doing right now.
Well, and I think it's putting things back into balance with the legislature and the executive branch, which I think is definitely needed. So, Alex, again, thank you for doing this today. We'll after the budget's settled and we see how the vetoes come through, we'll have another conversation, or we may have another one sooner, but we'll see. But thank you for doing
Thanks,
this.
Rick.
All right.
Thanks for watching, and to keep up with what's going on, be sure and subscribe. Just click on the little dog to the right and click the subscribe button. You can also like this video and click on the bell, which will notify you of new content. This really helps the channel grow. We appreciate you.